Hi there. Welcome to this spooky story. Tonight, we're going to explore a creepy house on Hollow Lane. This house has dark secrets, and one woman is about to find out why no one should go near it. Do you like scary stories? Stay with me, and let's see what happens. And if you enjoy the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's start. The house on Hollow Lane. The house on Hollow Lane had been empty for years, sitting quiet and dark at the end of the street. Everyone in town avoided it, and no one could remember the last time anyone had lived there. The stories about the house were always the same: whispers of strange noises, shadows moving at night, and terrible things that happened to those who entered. I didn't believe the stories, at least, not until I moved to the neighborhood. My apartment was small, just across the street from the old house. Every time I looked out my window, it seemed to stare back at me, like it was alive. It was on one of those nights, with the rain falling hard, that I first saw the light. A dim glow appeared in one of the windows of the house. I froze, staring at it from my window. It didn't make sense. Nobody lived there. Nobody had lived there for years. I grabbed my phone and snapped a picture, just to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining it. But when I looked at the photo, the window was dark. The light was gone. Just my mind playing tricks, I muttered, but I couldn't shake the unease creeping up my spine. The next morning, I told myself I wouldn't look at the house again. It was just an empty building, I thought. No reason to think about it. But as I left for work, I saw something new: footprints in the muddy path leading up to the front door. They were large, too big to belong to a child, and they stopped at the door like whoever made them had walked straight inside. I stared at the door for a moment, wondering if I should knock, but something about the house kept me rooted in place. A chill ran down my back. When I got home that evening, the street was silent, except for the wind whispering through the trees. I told myself I'd forget about the footprints and the light. But as I climbed the stairs to my apartment, I noticed something strange. A single piece of paper was lying on the floor by my door. I picked it up, my heart pounding. The paper was old, yellowed at the edges, and the writing on it was messy and rushed. "Stay out of the house. It watches." I turned the paper over, but there was nothing else. No name, no clue who might have left it. My hands trembled as I unlocked my door and stepped inside. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with questions. Who left the note? Was it a warning, or a prank? And what did they mean by "it watches"? At midnight, I gave up trying to sleep. I sat by the window, staring at the house again. The sky was cloudy, the streetlights casting long shadows across the road. And then I saw it. The front door of the house opened, just a crack. A dark figure stood there, barely visible in the shadows. I couldn't make out a face, but they stood still, like they were waiting for something or someone. My chest tightened. I reached for my phone to call someone, anyone, but when I looked back, the door was shut, and the figure was gone. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I felt like a ghost of myself. My head was heavy, my eyes red from lack of sleep. I told myself I wouldn't think about the house or the figure at the door. Maybe it was all a bad dream. But then I saw the second note. It was waiting for me on my doorstep, just like the first. This time, the paper was crumpled, and the writing looked more desperate. "Do not go inside. It knows you." My stomach sank. Who was leaving these notes? How did they know what I'd seen? I shoved the paper in my bag and left for work, trying to focus on normal things. But all day, the words repeated in my head, "It knows you." When I got home, the street was quiet again. Too quiet. No kids playing, no cars driving by, just the sound of the wind. I glanced at the house, half expecting to see someone standing at the window, but it looked as empty as ever. Still, the silence made my skin crawl. That night, I tried to sleep, but the noise started. It was faint at first, a tapping sound, like something knocking gently on a wall. I sat up, listening, my heart racing. The sound came again, louder this time. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the window. I pulled the curtains aside, my hands shaking. But there was nothing there. Just the streetlight casting eerie shadows on the pavement below. Then I heard the voice. It was low and whispery, almost like the wind, but it was unmistakable. "Come inside," it said. I stumbled back from the window, my heart pounding. The voice was coming from the direction of the house. I grabbed my phone and dialed the police. I didn't know what I'd say, but I couldn't ignore this anymore. Before I could hit call, there was a knock at my door. It was slow, deliberate, like whoever was on the other side wanted me to know they were there. I held my breath, too scared to move. The knock came again, louder this time. I forced myself to step forward, reaching for the doorknob. My hand shook as I turned it, pulling the door open just a crack. No one was there. I stepped outside, looking up and down the hall. It was empty. But on the floor, just outside my door, was another note. This one was different. The paper was torn and smudged, and the words looked rushed, almost frantic. "You're too close. It's coming for you." The third note left me trembling. "It's coming for you." I tried to convince myself it was all some kind of elaborate prank, but deep down, I knew better. The house, the voice, the figure at the door, it all felt too real. I couldn't stay in my apartment. Not with this constant sense of being watched, hunted. I packed a bag with essentials, grabbed my car keys, and decided to leave. I'd stay in a motel, far away from Hollow Lane. But as I stepped outside, I saw something that made me freeze. The front door of the house on Hollow Lane was open again, just a crack. A dim light spilled out, flickering like a candle. I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but something stronger pulled me toward the house. I couldn't leave without knowing what was inside. I crossed the street slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. The air felt heavy, colder the closer I got. When I reached the front steps, I paused, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Then I heard it again. "Come inside." The voice was clearer now, no longer a whisper. It was calm, almost inviting. Against my better judgment, I pushed the door open. The inside of the house was dark, except for the faint glow from a single room down the hall. The walls were bare, the air thick with dust, and the smell of something old and damp hung in the air. I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. The door creaked shut behind me, and I flinched at the sound. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaking. No answer. I moved toward the light, my legs feeling like lead. The flickering glow came from a small candle sitting on the floor of the living room. Next to it was a piece of paper. I picked it up, my hands trembling. The message was short, written in the same frantic scrawl as before. It's too late. I barely had time to process the words before I heard the sound of footsteps behind me. I spun around, my heart racing, but the hallway was empty. Then, from the shadows, the voice came again, "You shouldn't have come." A figure stepped out of the darkness. It was the same one I'd seen before, tall and still, its face hidden in shadow. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice breaking. The figure didn't answer. It raised a hand, pointing toward the far corner of the room. I turned, and my breath caught in my throat. There, scratched into the wall, were the words, "It watches. It waits." Before I could react, the candle went out, plunging the room into total darkness. The room was pitch black, and the air felt suffocating. My heart pounded in my chest as I fumbled for my phone, desperate for a light. But before I could turn it on, I heard the voice again, low and chilling. "You were warned." I froze. The voice wasn't coming from a single direction, it seemed to surround me, echoing off the walls. Suddenly, the room was flooded with light. Not from my phone, but from dozens of candles, their flames flickering like they were alive. I could see now that the walls weren't bare, they were covered in writing, the same words repeated over and over. "It watches. It waits." In the center of the room stood the figure. Its face was still hidden in shadow, but now I could see its hand, a long, thin finger pointing at me. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "What do you want from me?" The figure didn't move, but the voice answered, louder this time, "You let it in." "Let what in?" I cried, stepping back toward the door. The figure tilted its head, almost as if it were amused. "You saw the light. You heard the voice. That was enough. Now it knows you." I shook my head, trying to make sense of the words. "What knows me?" The figure stepped closer, and for the first time, I saw its face. Or rather, the lack of one. Its features were blank, smooth, like a mask that had never been carved. The voice said, echoing through the room. The air grew colder, and I felt something behind me, a presence, heavy and suffocating. Slowly, I turned, and that's when I saw it. In the corner of the room, where the shadows were deepest, something moved. At first, it was just a shape, barely visible. But then it grew, spreading across the walls and ceiling like ink in water. It had no form, no face, just darkness that seemed alive, pulsing and writhing. I tried to run, but the door slammed shut before I could reach it. "You can't leave," the voice said, calm and final. "It's already inside you." The shadow moved closer, swallowing the light from the candles. I felt it reach me, cold and heavy, pressing against my skin. My vision blurred, my head spinning as the voice whispered one last time, "It will watch. It will wait. And it will take." When I woke up, I was lying on the floor of my apartment. The bag I'd packed was still next to me, untouched. For a moment, I thought it had all been a nightmare. But then I saw the note on my coffee table. The paper was crumpled and smudged, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. "You can't escape it. No one ever does." I looked out my window. The house on Hollow Lane was dark again, quiet and still. But I knew it was watching. And now, so was I. Wow, what a story. The house on Hollow Lane is still out there, waiting in the dark. What would you do if you saw a house like that? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and share it with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our next scary adventure. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.